I'm fine, you know. This is what this week has taught me. I could give you a laundry list of my problems. I could itemize them and arrange them into a spreadsheet for your perusal. You could take that list of problems and give them a read. You would see a conspicuous absence there. Among my complaints of not enough sex or money, a waistline that never seems to decrease no matter how little I eat, you would not see certain things. You wouldn't see me complaining of having to run to an underground shelter to avoid being blown to pieces. You wouldn't see me hysterical because I have no idea if my family, suddenly thrown into the tumult of war, are still alive. You wouldn't see me worrying that my culture, my language, and everything I hold dear was being snuffed out by the onslaught of tanks and guns. You would see none of that, because, when you boil it down, I'm fine, you know. It's so easy to be distanced from the things that are really happening in the world. Our information is mediated through screens. We read headlines and scan articles. Our conception of what's going on moulded by the sterile prose of reportage. We see lives as numbers, the dead as marks on a huge tally board. It is so hard, from a distance, to dredge up the empathy that evolution has honed in us. That requires a personal connection. That requires a return to real human communication, not a Twitter hot take, not a Guardian opinion piece. A few nights ago, I attended the Musizieren für Frieden at the Brandenburg Gate. This was a collection of choirs and musicians from around Berlin that had gathered to get together to talk and sing and to process the horror that is happening in Ukraine at the moment. Of course, on the phone the night before, I had been my typical, cynical, childish self. "What's the point?" I asked. "They've already invaded. This won't change anything." But I went to see. I wasn't wrong. This relatively small gathering of people, singing in front of a monument to nationalism, a monument that has transformed itself over the last 30 years into a gathering place for people, a place where grievances can be aired and shock can be shared. This small group of people calling for peace and an end to the tyrannical incursion into Ukraine won't change anything. There's too few of us. But what it did do was to bring this whole thing home to me. Being with those people awoke my empathy. Being with those people tore me away from the screens that mediate my connection to the world. A woman got up to speak, her perfect German clearly inflected with a Ukrainian accent. Her words, choked by tears, echoed around the Pariser Platz. If you could have heard her, this war in distant lands would have felt a lot less distant. She was clearly desperate. She spoke of not knowing how her family was. She spoke of the feeling of impotence, being 1,000 kilometers away while Russian shells battered into her homeland. She implored the German government not to forget the people of Ukraine. This country that had welcomed her now had a unique opportunity to recognize the contribution that people of all nations bring to it. She spoke of barring Russia from SWIFT and how such a small gesture could save millions. She stood there on this freezing February night, tears flowing down her face, her voice choked with the real possibility that her family, her friends, her culture could be wiped out by the thirst for power. She brought this war to my doorstep. I realized something. That these red lines drawn on the map mean nothing. That these borders that divide us are pure artifice, created by the patrician class years ago to consolidate power and wealth. I realized that, even though distance and language and the kind of shit we put on our chips can appear to separate us, that we are all the same. And these artificial scars, scoured into our minds, mean nothing. We all fear. We all love. And we all need that love to be reciprocated by others. That is what we were doing a few nights ago at the Brandenburg Gate. With every note sung, with every round of applause, we were reminding that poor, desperate woman from the Ukraine that we understood her and we were with her. We were reminding ourselves that we are human beings and we reject these artificial boundaries constructed to tell us we're different. We are not different. And as the notes of Ode to Joy sublimed into the winter air, we were strengthened in our commitment to one another. Kultur kennt keine Grenzen. Culture knows no borders. Culture is what happens when people sit around a fire together and be. Culture can know no borders because culture is intrinsic to what we are as animals, and borders are simply the confection of the greedy. I stand with the people of Ukraine as I stand with humanity. Did I change much last night? Not really. But if we all lift up our heads from our phones and our laptops and we recognize the humanity in all of us, we can topple mountains. We can fulfill our one duty on this planet: to be human. Peace.